You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. Is all pain generated by the brain? And what would that mean for chronic pain? Join me for today's fascinating conversation. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer. What if everything we've been told about holistic health, healing, and well-being is only part of the story? Because thriving in today's world looks different than it used to. Here, we challenge the narratives, rethink what it means to become human, and explore how that shapes the way we lead, live, and step into our full potential. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. Chronic pain often feels like a never-ending journey with limited solutions, but could a new perspective offer hope and real change? We explore the possibility of recovering from neuroplastic pain, challenging the belief that chronic pain has to be a life sentence. Paulina Soble, a licensed clinical social worker, is the founder of the Pain Reprocessing Therapy Center and the executive director of WellBody Psychotherapy. Paulina is a psychotherapist in private practice, helping patients unlearn pain by understanding their mind-body connection and deactivating fear signals in the brain. Paulina presents at pain trainings, conferences, universities, and hospital systems, aiming to build a comprehensive network of practitioners to treat the millions who suffer from chronic symptoms. Paulina spearheads the development of new initiatives, professional trainings, and educational resources to expand the reach of pain reprocessing therapy and improve access to providers and patients. Here's my interview with Paulina Soble. Hi, Paulina. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because we will be talking about, I want to say almost one of my most favorite topics is pain reprocessing therapy. And pain is not a fun thing, but pain reprocessing therapy is something so interesting that I really wish we could share more with the world. So I'm really glad you're here to talk about that and to explore this a little bit more. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Even what you just said right there, pain is not a fun thing. That's actually a great topic in that pain is actually not always all bad. So maybe that's something we'll get into as to why we can actually maybe use pain to our advantage and why it's not always a bad signal.
Yeah, that's amazing. And actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I feel we have lots to talk about around that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll get into that. So, for starters, Paulina, would you like to share a little bit about yourself and maybe your journey and your story, the parts of it that you feel connect to what you do today, and share with our listeners a little bit about what it is that you do today?
Sure. Yeah. So I think my journey starts when I went to grad school at the University of Southern California for my degree in social work, my master's degree. And I had never heard of pain reprocessing therapy. I had never considered pain being treated from a psychological perspective. That was not really the way I grew up. But I was able to get an internship when I was in grad school at the Pain Psychology Center, which some of our listeners might be familiar with. And this is a private practice where they really focus on treating chronic neuroplastic symptoms. So any symptom that has brain influence that might be generated by the brain rather than by a structural injury to the body. And that's really where I learned the concept that this could even happen and exist, and that pain could exist outside of structural damage. This wasn't something I was initially familiar with. But once I learned about it and I learned the treatment and I started treating some patients, I realized how effective and impactful it was and how much it made sense. And it made me really reflect on my own experiences and symptoms, and that I wouldn't say that I was someone who identified as having chronic pain. I feel very lucky to say that. But I certainly always, I had headaches throughout my life. I always had stomach problems. It always coincided with school and stressful times, especially when I had exams. And I realized how much else was at play. and how these psychological danger signals impact the way I feel every day. And it just really clicked for me. I think it was a light bulb moment. Yeah, my goal now is really just to inform people about this perspective and this treatment and allow people to get the needed care to recover from chronic pain. I think there's a message that chronic pain is something to be managed and deal with and find a way to live with it. And what's so special about pain reprocessing therapy is that if you have neuroplastic pain, it's actually very possible to recover from pain. It's not something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. So that's what I'm focused on doing now.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I find this is one of the most empowering pieces of what we're talking about today is exactly as you said, having a label or a diagnosis of some kind of chronic pain condition, and then feeling almost like that is sort of the end of the road, right? So that's where you are now. Chronic pain means chronic, means forever. There's nothing you can do. And there's this really empowering pain reprocessing therapy that could change a lot of that perspective for you. So I think that's one of the things to keep in mind as we come through this episode now is there may be possibilities for yourself if you are on a chronic pain journey to actually listen in today and maybe find something that might not make the chronic pain diagnosis so final, right? That there is another perspective. So that to me is one of the most exciting pieces of this because I've firsthand experienced the transformation that can happen. And a lot of the times in a chronic pain journey, for people on the outside, it's really hard to understand. I feel sometimes when people have chronic pain, when things are so persistent and they go on for a really long time, very often we're told, well, just snap out of it. It's just all in your head. If you just stop focusing on it so much, it'll just go away. To a certain degree, actually, it can be all in our heads if we're saying it's pain generated by the brain. Maybe share with us a little bit more about what that actually means when you say that.
Yeah, I think that that message can certainly come across as invalidating when you've been struggling with something and you're feeling it every single day, right? And the reality is, it's not something that you're making up. You're not just being dramatic, and the pain is very real. All pain is generated by the brain, regardless of whether it reflects a physical tissue injury or not. But maybe the pain is not all in your head, but maybe it's all in your brain, in that pain is a danger signal. And how we started this podcast, we were saying pain is not all bad, even though it's not fun. It serves as a warning sign. If there is a threat to our physical body, we should feel pain so that we can stop what we're doing or seek help or go to the doctor or get the needed treatment that we might need to survive. But because pain is a danger signal, there's also many psychological danger signals that we all experience on a daily basis. Stress, anxiety, trauma, grief, whatever it might be for you. And these psychological danger signals can actually activate pain. They can cause pain to either begin or persist because your body or your brain is interpreting some sort of threat, even though that threat might not be to your body. So that's sort of the premise and the basis of pain reprocessing therapy. That doesn't mean that what you're experiencing is fake or isn't there. It very much is. It just means we might need a different treatment course to help you really feel better.
This is really interesting because if we are talking about all pain is generated by the brain, right? That explains to me a little bit of why we can have an injury, like an actual physical injury, but that injury heals. And that was the case for me as well, right? My injury healed. I got the all clear from the doctor, and yet I kept experiencing pain. So this explains a lot of why we can heal from a physical or a tissue injury or a bone injury that we've had. And yet the brain will continue to generate these danger signals and that pain will persist. And sometimes that I feel is the most confusing part about this is that when we sit down and we say, well, my back has healed or my shoulder has healed or this has healed, why am I still in pain, right? So that's a very interesting insight, I feel, for when it comes to chronic pain. And how does pain reprocessing therapy actually approach this whole topic differently? So usually most of us probably got some kind of pain medication. We were sent off to physio or something along those lines. And then if we come out of all of that and the pain is still there, how does PRT approach this now from the perspective of this neuroplastic pain?
Mm-hmm. There's two sort of main buckets. It's a two-pronged approach, we say, when it comes to pain reprocessing therapy. So first, we want to address a patient's fear around their symptoms. Are they reinforcing that there is physical danger, that there is a physical threat? And these questions that patients ask are so normal, thinking, is there something wrong with me? Is there something the doctors are missing? How and when will I recover from this? Should I be doing this or that? Or should I avoid this or that? Am I going to make my recovery worse? So we need to approach what is actually going on with your body. And that comes from assessment of the symptoms and evidence gathering as to how the brain is at play here, as to how the pain behaves in ways that structural pain might not. And then the other piece, which we touched on, is more so general fears that might keep a patient in a state of hypervigilance or high alert. There's an overlap in the different systems that assess for threats. So if one danger signal is activated, it's more likely for another danger signal to become activated as well. If we're existing in a more hypervigilant state because something else is going on in our life, maybe we're in an unsafe relationship, or there's unstable housing, or we just have a big presentation coming up at work, or our kids are stressing us out, right? Anything that anyone could experience on a daily basis. This can cause one danger signal to go off, so to say. And if your brain is existing in that high alert mode, then maybe even unconsciously, you're consistently scanning for danger and for potential threats in your environment and in your body. And this includes physical sensations in the body. So you might feel a sensation that's actually neutral, but your brain has this added layer of fear or threat. And that causes that sensation to feel painful because your brain is trying to warn you that something might be wrong. But what might be wrong isn't necessarily what's happening in your physical body. We also need to approach what else is going on in the patient's life that is causing them to view the world in this way, as though there could be a potential threat around every corner.
Does this kind of mean, in a sense, that if we are a person who is kind of naturally prone to a little bit more worry or anxiety, that we may also be more likely to experience neuroplastic pain in these situations because of maybe our nervous system being overactive already or being more vigilant already? Or if people have experienced a lot of childhood trauma or trauma in their lives and they're already in this overactivated state, does that make us more likely then to experience chronic pain in that sense and neuroplastic pain?
Yes, generally, yes. And I think you explained it perfectly. If you have been through certain experiences, trauma, you may have learned to scan your environment for potential threats. You may have learned to exist in fight or flight mode or be on high alert. And that might be because it was adaptive to you, because it was helpful to your survival. But we kind of use this analogy of like watching a horror movie. If you're home alone at night and you're watching a horror movie and you hear a sound or you see a shadow, it might make you jump and scream or hide or run or basically scan the room and see what's going on. But if the same stimulus happened during the day when it was sunny out and your family was home and you were feeling calm, you wouldn't react to that stimulus in the same way at all. You might brush it off, not really notice it, not jump to the worst case scenario. When we're existing in this high alert state, if our nervous system is very overactive, which again, at one time may have been really adaptive for us, that can cause us to jump at the slightest sensation as well in our body, to perceive, sensations that we feel on a daily basis as though they could be potentially dangerous. And I think especially if you experience chronic pain, you do fairly naturally overanalyze every sensation. You do preoccupy on what you're feeling in your body because you're worried about what it might turn into. And you don't want it to become the chronic pain that you've been experiencing for the last year or whatever it might be. Yes, that nervous system overactivation is a big trigger to developing neuroplastic chronic pain, unfortunately, but maybe fortunately because we're aware of it. So it's something we can work on.
Yeah. Absolutely. And actually, I think it's one of the pieces that for the very first time felt like something real I could understand, right? Because there was just this continued pain, but nobody had any idea why that was there. Then asking, yes, did I miss something? Did the doctor miss something? Is there something gravely wrong with me because we can't find an answer? Actually, the nervous system piece was the first thing where this started to make sense to me. And I'm kind of thinking maybe a lot of the listeners also that might make sense to them if they go back through their lives, right? And think about some of the times or pieces where their nervous system may have already been in the state of vigilance and then coming into chronic pain. There may actually be a lot of dots that are connecting at that point when we talk about that. The other thing is that as you're explaining a little bit about PRT and chronic pain, is that I think we also become anticipatory at some point, right? We're expecting our pain to flare up for certain things or have more pain when we do certain things. I know that people used to tell me, oh, I'll get the bill for this later. So I'm going to do a shopping run right now, but I know I'm going to get the bill with chronic pain later. So there's already this anticipation, right? That if we put a certain amount of effort that we are physically exerting ourselves, there will be some kind of repercussion to that when it comes to chronic pain. So I think there's a lot of that vigilance and that fear involved when we're dealing with a lot of the chronic pain situations. So it's really interesting how all of that ties together and then comes into the brain. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's only natural and only human. And it shows that you care about yourself and you're trying to protect yourself. But exactly as you explained, that is how the brain generates pain. The brain will combine sensory input and internal predictions. So the sensory input is nerve endings in our body that send a message up our spinal cord and to our brain, informing us of if there is any tissue damage or injury. But there's this added layer, this second half of this, which is the internal predictions. And that's exactly what you just explained. That's what you expect to feel after exercise or before bending down, or before performing some activity. It's your brain's prediction about what is happening and what is going to happen. And then the actual pain experience becomes a combination of the two. So maybe there is no tissue damage to begin, or maybe there's a light sensation, some soreness, whatever it might be. But that prediction and maybe prediction error is what causes the pain to ramp up and amplify and persist. So that's another big piece that we'll work on with patients, because of course you feel that way. If you're always exhausted after your day at school or going to the gym, then of course you expect to feel that way, that fatigue or that pain or whatever it is for you when you do it again the next day. So it's this kind of pattern loop we have to start breaking.
Yeah, that's really interesting and a fascinating part of chronic pain that I think in the beginning, many people aren't aware of that those are actual patterns, right, that connect back to the brain. When we talk about PRT, then pain reprocessing therapy, can you explain some of the steps that are involved in it without obviously giving away the whole therapy or creating a session here in the episode, but can you walk us through maybe what that would look like if somebody came for treatment with PRT, and what can they kind of expect that would happen over the time? And how long does this usually last when people come to see you? What do they usually kind of look at for sessions to take and time to spend with you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So we ran a clinical trial that really validated pain reprocessing therapy as the most effective current treatment for chronic pain. And in this study, I mean, the conditions were fairly perfect and the therapists were considered experts, but the patients had only 8 sessions of pain reprocessing therapy. And the results were astounding. 98% of the PRT patients improved, 66% reported that they were pain-free or nearly pain-free. And this was 1 session with a physician and then 8 sessions with a therapist. It's designed as a short-term treatment. I'll usually tell patients to give it about 3 months, maybe 12 sessions, in order to start seeing some change. And maybe that doesn't mean that your pain has gone, but maybe it means that your fear has lowered, or that your response to your symptoms are different, or that you feel more in control or more safe when it comes to the pain, even if the sensation is still there. I try not to have patients put too much pressure on themselves to recover the same way the study participants did, because pressure is only another added danger signal that we want to diminish rather than enhance. But with PRT, what we do is first assess the patient for structurally caused or non-structurally caused symptoms. We want to understand, does the pain ramp up with stress? Are the symptoms very inconsistent? How do they present in your body? Is it the same way that a structural symptom would? Does it line up with the diagnosis? Are there basically inconsistencies that we can point out? And that leads into psychoeducation for the patient, which might be a matter of how much they know about this before ever coming into a session. So we're going to explain how and why pain develops and why pain chronifies and how fear fuels pain. And the next step is then to help the patient gather their own personal evidence to gain confidence or gain buy-in of this brain-generated pain. So what can they see? Do they tend to notice, okay, my pain hurts when I'm in the car, but it hurts a lot more on the way to work than on the way home from work, right? We're going to help them gather their own evidence, because we want that evidence before we engage really in the treatment, before we engage in the exposure to the pain. We're going to expose the patient to the sensation, to the symptom, but help them reassess and reappraise that sensation as safer than they once thought. And in order to do that, we need to know, well, why am I safe? Why is my body not in danger? So that's why we need that evidence piece first. And then finally, what we've addressed is we're talking about other fears outside of the pain that might keep us in a state of hypervigilance or fight or flight. What is revving up your nervous system? What is turning on your danger signals? Because that is also going to amplify and perpetuate your pain. So those are kind of the main stages, the main steps of the treatment.
Thank you for sharing those. And that actually, if we're talking about 8 sessions or 12 sessions, I mean, that's a relatively short time compared to how long a lot of people have actually been challenged with chronic pain. So I feel that that would definitely be a worthwhile thing to try and to invest some time into and see if that makes a difference for you. Because if you're seeing these kind of results in the study, I have a feeling that a lot of people could actually walk away with an improvement in their pain in those sessions. And yes, of course, let's not put a number on it because then people will expect that it should be gone by that time. So we add more stress to that. But certainly to me, that sounds like a very doable thing for people, right? We're not asking them to spend years in some kind of therapy or years working on a special diet or exercise or movement, but something actually doable for people who may already have sort of a fear of committing to things because of chronic pain, because it's so unpredictable and sometimes you're exhausted and you can't do things. So that to me sounds like something that absolutely someone with chronic pain could approach and bring into their lives. So yeah, I'm really fascinated by this. Now, are there injuries or conditions where PRT might not be the best approach? I'm kind of thinking that there are obviously other types of pain too outside of neuroplastic. So what are the things where PRT may be not as effective, and where does it really shine? Where have you seen that PRT is really effective?
Yeah, it's a great question. So honestly, PRT can be applied to everything. There are some structural conditions, of course, that need medical attention. I'm thinking about a diagnosis like MS or cancer or rheumatoid arthritis, where you do need medical intervention. That being said, that second prong of the treatment, which is fear of the way this diagnosis is impacting my life and my family and my career, more existential fears, whatever it might be, that can certainly make your pain worse. In that case, I wouldn't tell a patient, do PRT in a vacuum and you will recover. Of course not. But it might help them manage the severity of their symptoms. In its pure form, PRT is designed for conditions that have really nothing to do with the body, where the body is structurally sound, you are healthy. And it's all due to the brain. And that can be almost any kind of chronic symptom that you could imagine. So chronic back pain, neck pain, headaches, foot pain, gastrointestinal issues, pelvic pain, foot pain, right? Any pain all over the body, as well as chronic fatigue, insomnia, itchiness, symptoms that you may not explain as pain, but still exist in a chronic fashion and are very uncomfortable. Yeah, the vast majority of symptoms you can even recover with PRT, but almost everything you can improve. It can help you in some way, even if it's just one treatment alongside others that you're also engaging with.
And that's definitely a possibility, right? Is that you do PRT alongside whatever, if you're doing physio or anything else that you're doing. I feel that PRT is really great as also a complementary therapy if you're feeling that, well, I still want to try what my doctor said or this, what my doctor said, then PRT can still be used alongside a lot of other things as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. I'm even thinking of maybe an athlete. Let's say they injure themselves in a basketball game while shooting the basketball. They hurt their shoulder and they might need surgery or they might need physical therapy and they might need ongoing physical therapy to make sure that their muscles and tendons and everything are strong and massage away scar tissue, whatever it might be. But I think in addition, as a complementary therapy, they might need pain reprocessing therapy because the next time they go out on the court and they shoot the basketball, they fear the pain coming back. They predict that the sensation will return. And so it does. And it's only due to the fact that there's fear. Maybe the body, they've recovered, right? Maybe all their treatments were successful and their doctor gave them a clean bill of health, but they have fear of re-injuring themselves or feeling that sensation again that was so traumatizing to them and impacted their career. Certainly, I think it can be very complementary to different therapies, which is why we train all types of professionals in this modality, occupational and physical therapists, as well as physicians and mental health therapists and coaches and massage therapists. They can all implement this treatment with their patients.
Yeah, I find that's really great because then people don't have to really decide, oh, should I stop my physio or stop doing what my doctor recommended? This all works together, right? It's all connected, all comes together. And if anything, I feel it'll improve a lot of the outcomes that on the trajectory that people are on, as you said, with athletes, for example, right? And of course, the fear of anticipating, well, what will happen next time when I make this movement or I injure myself again. So yeah, absolutely. This to me is really something that we can use in so many different fields. You just touched on a handful of professionals that you guys train for PRT. And so, of course, you have sort of the two sides of this, right? You don't just provide treatment for people who are looking for chronic pain treatment, but you also train professionals in providing this kind of treatment. So if listeners are curious, I feel that the training path, it's not necessarily strictly reserved for professionals, right? If you are experiencing chronic pain, actually going through the training program might be very interesting for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have designated programs, groups, individual therapy for patients, but patients have also taken our professional training just simply to learn and understand more and maybe help themselves or help a friend or family member. But yes, we do offer professional training in the modality through the Pain Reprocessing Therapy Center, where we've trained thousands of clinicians and providers, which is really amazing because the goal is really to expand access to this treatment. So I'm glad it's becoming a little bit more accessible around the world.
Yeah. And I feel this is also something that we can absolutely do remotely. So people don't really have to live where their PRT professional or provider lives. This can be done in an online session as well. And I have found this extremely effective in online sessions. So I feel it's a little bit more accessible than physiotherapy, where you really have to go somewhere and see someone, or some of the other therapies that are available, because this can be done from anywhere. So you can do this from the comfort of your own home and work with a provider. So I find that's a really special part of the efficacy of this as well.
Yes. And I think it's helpful. There's less barrier to entry for patients who find it difficult to drive or travel or go sit in an office. I mean, you can do this from the comfort of your bed. And our practice is completely virtual. We have therapists all over the country. who you can work with. And I do see all my patients virtually, and I find it very effective. I don't think it needs to be in person. Sometimes that's nice, but it doesn't necessarily impact patient outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us a little bit about what PRT has available. We talked a little bit about sessions. We talked a little bit about training. I know you also have your practice and you guys have the Pain Reprocessing Therapy Podcast. So share a little bit about all of the resources, programs, and services that are available for our listeners if they'd like to dive into a new perspective on their chronic pain journey.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a lot out there. Our website is painreprocessingtherapy.com, which is where everything is housed. But we offer professional trainings for all different types of providers, any type of professional that treats patients with chronic pain so that they can bring this modality into their practice. And our private practice is called WellBody Psychotherapy. That's where we see patients one-on-one, and we can treat them with individual therapy and coaching. We also do have a Pain Reprocessing Therapy podcast where you can get insights into patient sessions, understand more about what this treatment is and what it offers. And yeah, we have a weekly newsletter. There's lots of resources out there. Our goal is just to educate and help more people find this treatment.
Yeah. And I love the Pain Reprocessing Weekly. So if our listeners are curious, if you want to have some insights, updates, new things about pain reprocessing therapy, definitely join the newsletter. There's a lot of information that gets sent out every week. Interesting nuggets, things that you can look into, implement in your own life and look up more information. So it's a really great way to start on the resources as well. And of course, we will link to what Paulina has just mentioned. We'll link to the website, to the therapy, to the podcast in the show notes so that you know how you can connect with Paulina and the Pain Reprocessing Therapy team. And I have to say, Paulina, thank you so much for sharing this, because I feel as chronic pain increases across the planet, I think, are looking for answers on how we can help ourselves. And unfortunately, just physical treatment is often not getting at the root of what's actually happening to us. So I feel this is such an important thing to share. And thank you for spending this time with me and sharing your wisdom and your perspective and your experience that you've had with your patients and with pain reprocessing therapy.
Of course. Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope that this can help patients and give them more hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope is a big thing, right? That it's one of the things that we lose, I feel, when we have a chronic pain diagnosis and we work at it for months or years and nothing changes. Hope is that thing that really disappears. And as our lives and activities are shrinking, this is one of the things that I think really we lose sight of the perspective of the future. So this can really help with that. So yeah, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for tuning in today. I hope that you have heard something in this episode that you can take away into your own life, or there's something that caught your curiosity that you want to connect with or find out more about on Paulina's website and the Pain Reprocessing Therapy podcast. Thanks for listening to us. Thanks for spending time with us. And until we hear each other again, take care of yourselves and be well. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.